Welcome to Let's Hear It.
Let's Hear It is a podcast for and about the field of foundation and nonprofit communications, produced by its two co-hosts, Eric Brown and Kirk Brown. No relation.
Well said, Eric. And I'm Kirk.
And I'm Eric. Let's Hear It is sponsored by the Kenneth Rainin Foundation, which enhances quality of life by championing the arts, promoting early childhood literacy, and supporting research to cure chronic disease. Online at krfoundation.org. We are also sponsored by the Previs Foundation, a foundation creating an inclusive, equitable, and dynamic future for all San Diegans. Check out their amazingly good podcast, Stop and Talk, hosted by Grant Oliphant and Crystal Page. You can find them at stopandtalkpodcast.com.
You can find Let's Hear It on any podcast subscription platform.
You can find us online at letshearitcast.com.
And if you like the show, please rate us on Apple Podcasts so that more people can find us.
Let's get on to the show.
So do you think we talk about courage enough?
Courage?
Courage.
What is this, the Wizard of Oz?
Think about all of the courage that's playing out across our field every day, right now.
Okay.
Given anything that's going on.
There is.
And I think this conversation that we're about to have is about courage as much as it's about communications.
Yeah. What an interesting and delightful bit of framing.
This is what I do for you. See, all of a sudden you're like, and now I want to have this conversation. See, stick with me, kid. You'll have so much work to do.
I just hope you're taking your blood pressure meds.
So
you're gonna explode.
This conversation is about courage. Courage. Set it up, and then we'll come back and I'll go further.
The knife.
This is about courage.
Okay, I spoke to my friend and colleague, Regan Douglass, who is the principal of Sparkwise Communications, a communications shop consultancy. And I thought it was time for some news you can use. By which I mean a lot of folks come to me asking me, is it time to hang out a shingle? Should I start my own thing? Should I consult? And I have lots of thoughts. And so I thought it might be fun to have Regan come on, who 2 years ago, she hung out a shingle. She showed courage.
There you have it. See?
The knife. And we had this great conversation about what is it like to become a consultant.
And it seems that Regan is no worse for the wear. And having done that, which I've seen others follow this path of leaving, the big institutions, hanging out the shingle and doing quite well. So let's call out Sparkwise Communications at sparkwisecommunications.com. And Regan Douglass is the principal, and I would argue founding principal of Sparkwise Communications. So this is Regan Douglass on Let's Hear It. We'll listen and we'll come back.
At some point, a lot of people who work in nonprofits or foundations get the tickle. They start asking themselves, what if I didn't have to give or get performance reviews? What if I didn't have to be in meetings to decide what snacks to serve to guests of my foundation? What if I could just spend my time doing strategy or messaging or other actual work? What if I didn't have to show my face at an office when I could be just as productive, if not more so, at home? What if I didn't have to wear pants? What if I could take my skills and talents to lots of organizations and make an even bigger difference in the world? What if I hung out a shingle and was my own boss? My guest today made that call. Regan Douglass spent years as a communications executive at PolicyLink, California Humanities, and the College Futures Foundation before launching Sparkwise Communications, her own consulting practice. She pulled the ripcord. Now, I made this same leap over a decade ago, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. But I also know it's not for everyone. But today, we're trying to give you something, useful, whether you're seriously considering going independent or just letting the idea simmer. What does it actually take? What does it actually cost? And what does it feel like when the only name on the org chart is yours? Regan Douglass, my pal, my partner in crime, welcome to Let's Hear It.
Hi, Eric. It's nice to see you. It's always nice to see you. And yes, I made the jump. Love the ripcord reference. You're known for even crazier metaphors than that. I would just like to say it's one thing I've appreciated about you. But leaping into consulting has been fantastic. No regrets.
Yes, I was a restrained metaphoricist in the cold open here. So, but who knows where we'll go. Actually, I may drop another fun metaphor on you later. Let's just get started by how'd you get started in communication? Nobody does that on purpose.
Nobody does it on purpose, except if you are I think my earliest first calling actually was justice. I had a little justice heart. I wanted to right the wrongs in the world. Occasionally, I wanted to tell people what to do. And I read a lot, and I watched a lot of performances, and I wrote a lot, and I knew I wanted to be a writer. I loved the look on people's faces in audience when they were sort of spelled by language. So those things kind of mashed together at some point in the primordial group. But I will say it was still somewhat accidental. I started working for PolicyLink. I was on their research and program team, and then I just absolutely fell in love with the communications. It felt to me like that is where the magic sauce was. That was the place where, if you wanted to see major systemic change, major policy wins in the world, you needed to figure out who you were talking to and what you needed them to understand or do differently. And that happens in the communications shop, and it happens with communications partners. So I suppose you could say I backed into it, but happily.
And then, so you're at PolicyLink, and then you went to California Humanities. What'd you do there?
I went to California Humanities by way of a graduate school writing program, and I was going back and forth between being a journalist and going into a writing program for grad school. Things have been a little crazy for journalists these last few years.
Oh, really?
These last 15 years. Yeah, I don't know if you've read that in the news, but it's been a little bit nuts. So
there's no news to read. Maybe it's because of the dearth of journalists.
Went to California Humanities, and the storytelling there at that time, a lot of our programming was around engaging a broad swath of the public in conversations about who do we want to be, who are we now, and what are we learning from our history. So, post 9/11, major rise in anti-Arab American, anti-Muslim sentiment, hate crimes, having public conversations about, is this who we are? Is this who we want to be? Does this remind us of some places we've been in the past with Japanese American internment? What can we learn from that? So those conversations I felt were really, really important. And it gave me some great insight into an organization that was kind of a combination of public and private, and did some grant making, ran some of their own programs, had a relationship with the government, but had their own board and their own way of working. So it was a great sort of tasting menu of a lot of the things that are available in the social sector.
And then you went to College Futures Foundation. You were the head of communications there, and you were digging down deep on education in California. What was that like? And, what was your job like?
That job evolved a lot over time. When I first came in, they were moving into a place where they were going to be developing a policy agenda. They were going to be doing sort of major change across the state around higher ed, economic opportunity for students. And I just wanted to be a part of that. I thought it sounded so exciting. And we had some really interesting leadership changes while I was there. And it felt like a really great opportunity to build out their communications team and function and skills across the organization. I got really lucky with some fantastic colleagues, some policy colleagues and some program colleagues who were really hungry for partnership. Sometimes, I think you have to do a tremendous amount of trust building until you can actually do projects together. But we did a little bit of that, but I mostly got pretty lucky with what I walked into. And then I also had the opportunity, in addition to doing organization-wide communications and executive communications, to helping provide some assistance to some of our grantees and trainings, and to building up our first ever news media investment portfolio. So we were funding news outlets, we were funding documentary filmmakers, and it was a really great opportunity to say, hey, if what we want to see is these changes around this topic, it's going to be virtually impossible to do that without educating a much broader swath of the public in what the ins and outs of these higher ed issues are. It was not something that was covered by most newspapers. If any newspapers had an education reporter, they were focused on K-12. So just a tremendous amount of coverage. And I think I worked with you on some of that too, Eric, and learned a lot from other folks that had been investing in journalism.
Yes, it's quite possible. So, okay, that all sounds great. And yet, here you are.
Here I am.
On your own.
On my own.
What was the thing that inspired you to go out on your own?
I think the biggest thing was, you just named a few of my jobs. I've had something like 20 different jobs in my career so far. It used to be a joke at College Futures whenever we had outside folks come in and talk about our previous work. Folks would just say, okay, Regan, what's the weirdest job you've ever had? And I could inevitably name 3 or 4 or 5 examples. But having worked, inside a foundation for over 10 years, at a nonprofit, at a research and advocacy public policy think tank, I worked for a city and regional government. I worked in internal comms for a multinational corporation. I've been in the classroom. And then on down and out and up and weirder and weirder. I think across all of these sectors, I've always seen this common thread that there tends to be a focus on communications activity and not strategy. And so, that's less about frustration with wearing pants to the office. And I do miss the snacks, I will say.
Yeah.
The performance reviews, nobody loves, although there's ways to make them a little bit more entertaining and useful. But strategic communications is such a special, just a jet fuel that can get you further faster with the work you're trying to do. And the thing that was making me beat my head against the wall was seeing how many different organizations were sort of picking from a menu of different activities without a clear plan for what was the change they wanted to see in the world and with which audiences, and how do you focus your resources, your activities, your choices to get you that outcome. And it sounds so simple, but it's really kind of challenging. And communications tends to be one of those things that a lot of folks think they can do because we're all talking to each other and we're all, reading and writing and consuming media and telling stories and all of those things. And of course we all can, but coming up with a really clear and fantastic strategy that works, that helps us say yes to some things and no to many, many other things, that's the hard part. And that's where it's really useful having a buddy. You were saying, what's it like being out on your own? I am and I'm not. I've got my shop, but I am partnering with lots of different folks who that's what they want, is they want a fresh pair of eyes and somebody to help them be more strategic. And I don't mean strategic in the sense of this is going to be really expensive and you can never implement it. I mean strategic in the sense of focused. We know it's going to get you where you need to go, and it's actually something that you can do on your own or with a little bit of help. I'm all about the solutions that actually live and work in the real world. Otherwise, what on earth is the point?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of people who are there with you thinking, ooh, I might be able to have the opportunity to help organizations actually do strategy, for example. And yet you're still in your job. You can hear me and you know who you are, still in your job. What was there something in particular, or was there some kind of flash of inspiration? You've been sitting on this egg for a long time. Like, how do you get it to hatch?
You sound like the Pied Piper of consulting, like you're trying to draw. Are you trying to draw people to the dark side, Eric?
It's like, there's 10 people going to send me their mortgage statement.
Well, I think one of the things that holds people back is the idea of what stability is and looks like, and whether or not knowing exactly what, to a certain extent, each month is going to hold financially in terms of your responsibilities, et cetera. And I am hardwired to enjoy change. I think that might be a little odd, but I like different projects, different challenges. I like growing and learning. And I don't like doing the same thing all the time. And I don't mind sort of weathering the ebbs and flows. I guess that's a tolerance answer. Is like, can you hack the ebbs and flows? And if you can, and if you can see opportunity in that, then this is the life for you, right? I think the other thing that really, the little whisper in my ear became louder and louder and louder when I realized, I'd been doing communications in-house for many, many years, loved it, learned a lot, but was losing my independent voice and perspective because at some point you become so married to the institutional voice and or the executive voice, whether that's ghostwriting or kind of inhabiting other people's thoughts or being the coach that's glued to the internal team and helping them figure out what they want to say. And I think at heart, I am a storyteller. And storytelling is really the thing that helps us imagine possibilities other than the reality we're living in now. And I felt that it's a use it or lose it situation where at some point I might just be fully absorbed. I don't know if it's fully absorbed by the Matrix or the Borg or what it is, but that I probably needed to unplug before that happened and find my creativity and my storytelling again so that I could use it for lots of different topics and causes and lots of different folks who are working on different things at different times. And that's what became the urge that I could not ignore.
Well, yeah, I find that the storytelling is deep in the lipids. You can always draw down upon it at some point, even if it loses its prominence sometimes. And the other thing I was thinking about, whenever anyone ever asks me, should I go out on my own? I just ask them, how thick is your stomach lining?
It's good.
That's it. That is the metric. We're going to take a very, very quick break, and we will be back with Regan Douglass of Sparkwise Communications. We're going to talk a little bit more about nuts and bolts right after this break. You're listening to Let's Hear It, a podcast about foundation and nonprofit communications hosted by Eric Brown and Kirk Brown. If you're enjoying this episode, you may just be a rule breaker. Check out Season 3 of Break Fake Rules with Glenn Gallich, CEO of the Stupsky Foundation, as he chats with inspiring leaders in philanthropy, government, media, and more about breaking the fake rules that don't work so that we can build a future that does. Check them out wherever you get your podcasts. And now, back to the show. We are back with Regan Douglass of Sparkwise Communications, who last year hung out a shingle. This was last year, wasn't it?
It's been almost 2 years.
I can't believe it's been 2 years. Wow.
I know. Time passes.
How time flies. Good Lord. Okay, let's talk a little bit of the practical part of this.
Okay.
Like, not the vision, the plumbing. Like, how did you structure your business? How did you figure out your rates? How did you get your first client? I mean, all that stuff sounds like there's a lot of, there's a website, like all this stuff. You used to have somebody who did stuff for you, and now you're that guy. What was that like, and what'd you do?
Oh, I didn't always have somebody who did stuff for me.
There was like IT and there was whatever, people.
That's where you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I sometimes had people who did stuff for me. I was lucky in that I'd had some jobs that were soup to nuts, but the highly technical skills, those go away quickly as the external environment changes. So yeah, I talked to a lot of people. I did my research. I did enough research. I didn't do so much research so that I became paralyzed by the fear of, I can't plan at all. I eventually just picked a date, made the leap, but I had the benefit of a number of colleagues who had gone in and out of consulting who told me what you told me. How thick is your stomach lining? Do you have the temperament for lots and lots of change and the unexpected? Do you have a core set of skills that you like to offer? And for me, it was strategic communications, coaching, campaign development, that sort of thing, messaging, storytelling. So that was really useful. I decided that I really wanted to be a shop of one for a while because I didn't want to leap into something that was overstructured and onerous and wouldn't allow me to be nimble. I had heard too many stories from people that they thought they knew where they wanted to specialize, and actually once they started doing consulting, they changed their minds. Or, they thought everything was great and they had work for 3 years, and then the economy changed and they couldn't pay their hires. And it was not a good feeling for anyone. So those are a couple of things I did. The website was easy peasy. That's something I've done a lot. And there are tons of great developers out there who can help you with the technical back end if you need that. And, the other thing I would say, I got some great advice about finances. I got some good advice about when I am ready to partner with other folks, which I've done, how to do that in a way that's going to be above board and in the clear and work for everyone. You'll be able to share information. You won't get blasted for some sort of legal infraction. All that was really helpful. So I would say do your homework, consult a lawyer at least for an hour, check that person's wall to make sure they have a real diploma. Think about what sort of do you want to file as an LLC, S Corp, all of those kinds of things. But the bigger thing to wrap your head around is, how do you want to spend the majority of your time? How do you make sure that you're not only doing the work that's right in front of you? You've constantly kind of got a pipeline of conversations going on and new work coming in. The other thing I will say, and you tell me, Eric, if this is nuts and boltsy enough, but
I don't know.
One of my biggest tips for consultants, and I've been on the other side, right? I have plenty of opinions about how a consultant should or shouldn't work with a nonprofit or a foundation and what they offer. And I've hired and I've been across the table. So I really do understand. I think if you approach conversations less like pitches and more like you are talking with someone about ideas, you're talking with someone who cares passionately about the work just as you do, and you want to figure out a solution that's going to serve the work, that is a conversation that opens up possibilities, that helps you listen much better, that helps you be more clear-sighted about whether or not you are actually a good fit for the project or if somebody else might be, and helps you come back to the client too sometimes and say, I know you think you want A, and I hear you. What about this other structure? What about this other thing first? And it's just a totally different kind of conversation than I am desperate to close this contract in the way this project was originally written within 45 minutes. I think that shuts both folks in the conversation down. So that's probably my biggest tip to people who are first starting out, who may not be comfortable going out and finding their own work for the first time in their lives.
There's a variant on that, which is every so often you go into one of these things and you smell something funky.
Yes.
And you go, I smell something funky. I think there's something rotten, and it's in the back of the fridge. And something's, and when you smell that funky thing, I always tell people, get out.
Yep.
It may be a lot of money. It may be a great opportunity. It may be a great organization. But if you smell that funky funk, it's there and you got to get out. That's my little piece of advice.
Listen to your instincts. And sometimes it can be a little challenging to get back in touch with your instincts.
Yeah.
Right. Some of us have done a really great job of shoving our instincts down and ignoring them and soldiering on. I mean, this is a strange moment in our history for instincts. But yes, if you think you smell a tuna fish sandwich wrapped in a giant red flag, that's probably what it is.
Yeah, I've had to do that, and it's hard. One of the things I've noticed, and it often happens, you end up with lots of different kinds of things. And it sometimes feels like you're spinning plates with one hand and juggling, I don't know what, chainsaws with the other.
Whoa. Do you have a chainmail glove is what I want to know. And does it go all the way up your arm? Because I'm very concerned about you now.
Covers my head if I'm lucky. How do you manage lots of different kinds of things with different because you're doing different kinds of work invariably with different clients.
Right.
Is that something you like? Is it something you're good at? If not, how do you deal with it? All that kind of stuff. How do you manage the stuff?
The stuff. Have you heard this term FOMO before?
Yeah, of course.
Have you heard?
That's why I never go to bed before 4 at the ComNet conference, because I know that there's a party somewhere.
Oh, fantastic. Have you heard the term JOMO?
No, I don't know from this JOMO.
It's the joy of missing out.
Oh, I have no JOMO.
The joy of missing out is that comes with consulting is significantly fewer administrative and executive meetings. And I love
that. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love humans. So that opens up a whole new world of time that you just didn't have before, right? So there's that. I think I would say one great thing about consulting is the natural ebbs and flows. There might be many months on end when you're just crazy busy and it's early mornings and late nights and weekends, but eventually there will be a downtime that will come when things will not come in, and you can use that time to do some of your bigger thinking and cultivation, or just resting, right? A vacation that you weren't planning to take, but now you're enjoying. The other thing is there should be through lines from one piece to another. And the more you learn and realize as you go, the more you are able to set up materials that will help you handle it when you have 30 different things going on, right? So it's like, okay, I need this template, this boilerplate, this thing that I can tailor each time. And the next time I won't be staring at a blank sheet of paper. I'll have an entry point, or I've done some research and it applies to several different projects that I'm working on. It's really different for these different clients, but some of the research is a useful basis. So those are a couple of things that I do. Again, working with partners and figuring out what do you uniquely do really well and what can you bring somebody else in so that you can take on more work and you're not absolutely drowning and the quality of the work doesn't suffer. Those, I would say, are the main ones.
Is there something about being an independent consultant that nobody warned you about? It could be psychological. It could be just the essence of that kind of job. Anything you weren't expecting?
I've always heard, and I've done consulting off and on over the years, but these last 2 years, this is the first time I've really gone into it 100% solo. That's my main focus, and that is quite different. I have heard and seen that it can be difficult to get information sometimes that you might have when you're inside an organization, or like a fulsome picture of the situation. A positive thing that nobody warned me about is that there's actually a benefit to that. Sometimes it's really great to not be drowning in all the details and to just get the highlights, even if those highlights are very much colored by the timing of your conversation. It's just, where are you now? And then you pull on the tendrils of what do you need to know. And it naturally limits the scope of the work. I don't know if you had this experience when you were in-house, but for me, almost every place I've been in-house and most of my peers and colleagues who are in the communications role, you sometimes end up becoming kind of therapist or counselor for the staff, or, surrogate strategy developer for any area of work, or there's creep, right? There's creep in the job, and it just, the longer you're there, the bigger it gets. So that's one thing I would say. Another thing I would say along those same lines, I have been surprised by how difficult it can be to get clear feedback. And I don't mean just, yay, that was great, and it was wonderful and life-changing, let's keep going, but actually, this is what I was envisioning when we started the project, and here's how it worked, and this is what I'm dealing with internally. And sometimes I'll see the effect of those decisions, and I have to back map what happened and then figure out, okay, I'm intuiting that you're having this difficult issue over here with a set of colleagues. This is actually not, a communications issue that can be solved by you with your team. This is actually a conversation you need to have with the CEO or the board, right? This is like an org-wide mission question that has been laid at your feet, but you're not telling me and you're thinking it's a communications issue, right? So that those kinds of things all under the header of interpersonal communication, like we're not that great as a society at giving feedback that's designed for a difficult, constructive conversation. I think we need to feel safe and we need to feel like we trust the other person in order to be able to do that. And it's one of my biggest goals with every partner I work with is to make them understand that I am on their team and that they can tell me anything that's going to make the work better and more useful, and that I want to hear anything they want to tell me. But it takes time.
Yeah. All right. So let's just say there's someone's listening. Like, oh my God, I want to be Regan. I want to do exactly what Regan did. Is there a question? Is there a question you'd want them to be honest with themselves about before they did that?
Well, I will make it a little bit about this moment and say that we're in a really particular moment in our field. And so many of your listeners are foundation nonprofit folks doing good at mission-driven orgs in the social sector, right? And
all of our listeners are doing good. If they're not doing good, they're not allowed to listen.
They're doing good in their sleep even, and they don't even know it. That is how pure of heart and intention they are, right? So,
well, sometimes I only do well in my dreams, but and then when I wake up, I'm like, ugh. But anyway, go ahead.
I don't believe that for 1 minute, but I'm glad to hear that you're having good dreams. You might.
I'm a much better consultant in my dreams.
Oh,
this
same.
Is true.
Same. I think that, our field goes through moments like many do, especially many that are so tied to what's happening socially, economically, politically. More openness and transparency, more of a sense of a kind of coherent movement building. And that's an environment where I think people feel more comfortable being open. It's clearer that different folks can contribute different things, but you're all working towards the same goal. And right now, I think a lot of people are feeling like a lot of nonprofit leaders, a lot of researchers and advisors, and the folks who benefit from the work of nonprofits are feeling like we're in an environment that's more of a resource scarcity environment. There's a lot of chaos coming at foundations and nonprofits and public serving institutions. That's by design. It has a chilling effect. It has a distracting effect. And as a result of some of that pivoting or that paralysis, I am seeing folks be a little more guarded and a little more in the sort of zero-sum game competition space. And I completely get it. I understand.
Yep.
I don't think there's any malicious intent, but I would say think about who you are as a consultant in that moment. And I understand that there's a degree of privilege embedded in it. It's part of the reason that I would love to see more foundations and nonprofits intentionally support women-led consultancies that are led by people of color, consultancies that are coming up out of the communities that they serve and are really contributing a perspective that foundation or nonprofit may not have. Who are you in that moment if it's more of a scarcity environment? And how are you going to operate? Whether that's your own mental health, whether that's your strategy, whether that's your savings. I mean that in the most practical way, but I also mean that in the mindset way of like, can you show up every day and not freak out? Are you still able to do good work? Is it worthwhile? And for me, I think that I really believe that systems sometimes can't really be improved enough around the margins. They have to be profoundly reimagined and replaced. And I think sometimes these moments of intense upheaval result in a better world, but you have to engage with that. You have to be the dreamer and the storyteller that sees the utopia and doesn't back away. And that requires the thick stomach lining that you were talking about.
Well, I could not agree with you more. I also think that it, in a sense, it gives you and our colleagues in the consulting world an opportunity to help folks navigate these difficult times, because folks really can turn inward, can lose some perspective, and can operate out of fear, and understandably so. But boy, oh boy, is it helpful to have somebody come in and talk them off the ledge and give them very specific things to do and help guide them through difficult times. So without putting too fine a point on it, I think that the prospect for these kinds of partnerships is very real, and it can be really productive. And if I were hiring somebody, you would be at the top of my list. I have so much enjoyed working with you over the years. I'm thrilled that your work is as robust and wonderful as it is. Regan Douglass, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you, Eric. It was lovely to see you as always.
And we're back. So before we get to the communications and the wisdom and the good humor and the willingness to waste time with us on our podcast, which is always so generous.
Yes.
I'm telling you, this is about courage. Regan has worked for some very significant organizations over a storied career, has accomplished so much. And at a certain point, Regan says, you know what? Now's the time. So among all of Regan's incredible gifts, talents, and experience, this decision to step into this role, it's incredibly courageous. And I guess I'm wanting to call this out so much because first I want to acknowledge and congratulate Regan on the change and be willing to talk about it. But also, who knows how many of our listeners might have this itch, might be thinking, you know what, maybe I could have impact. And I say, do it. Just like we say, write the book, do this, make this change, make this change.
I agree. Now it was for me, as I said, I think in the beginning, one of the best decisions I ever made. The other one was proposing to my wife, although she would say that she proposed to me. There is a point of contention there.
Where on that list is this podcast?
A very, very low.
Okay.
It's somewhere between whether I getting the gray suit instead of the blue suit.
Okay, gotcha.
But anyway, so after getting married and deciding to have a child, becoming my own consultant was probably the best and smartest decision I ever made. And so it can work for people, and it's certainly working for Regan, who is really good. She's busy. She's so engaged, and as you got from this conversation, she's the kind of person you want to bounce ideas off of. She's the kind of person you want to have in the room to teach you stuff. Yeah. And I think that is one of the roles that a consultant can and should play.
Well, in this glimmer of insight, Regan describes having that justice heart, wanting to see a world that's fundamentally better and can be changed for the good, but then recognizing that communications is where the special sauce happens.
Yes.
And I think this is this huge trajectory that change and philanthropy is still making. And it makes me have a question. Is communications still the add-on thing that gets tacked onto the strategy, or is it actually the centerpiece of the strategy? Because I think we would argue it's got to be the centerpiece, but it still feels like it floats around somewhere in the ether a lot of the time. And Regan gets this and is like, no, communications has got to be at the centerpiece of how you think about strategy.
Communications is the camel's nose under the strategy tent. I've said it many times, and it's true. Because what'll happen is someone will bring you in. It's like, oh, we need to do some messaging, and you go, yeah, sure, I know where this is going. Like, yeah, we need to name this thing, and then you ask 4 questions about what are you trying to achieve, and they go, damn it, we need to do strategy. And then you end up asking these strategic questions, and then you're into strategy. That's always how it goes.
And so, how did Regan really say that she's had like 20 different jobs during your conversation? So, because that's the other thing too, to do this communications work artfully, strategically, and well, you need to draw on so much experience and expertise. And I would say that as Regan is moving through the world and collecting these different experiences, that's all coming in. That's all part of then the package of what becomes Regan Douglass at Sparkwise Communications. Like that's what you're drawing into when you actually pull on the resources of a consultancy like this. You get more than that person. You get more than that communications expertise. You get this worldview that's been shaped by all these different experiences. And I would argue, Eric, that that's a version of what happened for you too when you left your big institutional job. Now all of a sudden you're sitting in these different settings, and you can bring all of this experience to bear. And it makes you a very nimble player in this very kind of crazy, weird, niche-y world that we live in related to all this stuff.
Well, when people hire me, they think they're getting the guy who used to run communications at the Hewlett Foundation. But what I'm really drawing upon is the time that I spent teaching comedy traffic school. Because basically,
tell us more.
Well, I was in college and I saw a flyer. And so I took the test or whatever I had to do, and they certified me to teach comedy traffic school, which I would do on a Saturday morning at 8:00 out in Walnut Creek or someplace very, different from where I was in Berkeley. And we'd sit there for 8 hours in a hotel room, conference room, and I would have to teach, traffic school, and I was supposed to be funny. So you go in with this expectation, like, okay, buddy, make me laugh. I'm not supposed to be here. And then you run out of material in about 2 hours, and you have to teach 8. Or else it's a felony. So you got to figure out how to vamp. So I would vamp.
So interesting.
So I think more of the work that I provide draws from my comedy traffic school days than it does from anything I might have learned at the Hewlett Foundation.
Well, can we talk? So Regan was at the College Futures Foundation, and can we talk a little bit about? There's so many different parts of Regan's experience that we could draw on, but one thing that she mentioned that struck me particularly, and this is a big deal when foundations do this, but she helped create a news media investment portfolio.
Yeah.
At that foundation. And so
totally cool.
Oh, isn't that great? So it's like you've got the whole thing, you've got the strategy, what are the policy outcomes we're trying to create, here are all the partners that can make this thing happen. You, of course, bring in your top-notch communications consultants to help amp up everybody's skills, and you're getting into the field. And then all of a sudden, philanthropy realizes, oh yeah, and we can invest in our own media channels to create coverage of these topics. And the one thing I like about how our field does it versus some others is that this is fact-based, evidence-based, real journalism,
actual journalism
that's being supported. Yes. Right. So it's like multiple wins there. Yes. We're not just seeding the field with more crazy making propaganda. This is like, no, actually, can we put forward real stories told by real people that capture real successes in the field that are documented and verifiable and are replicable because they're going to be useful in other places. So that part of what Regan has done, I feel like that's another enormous piece of the puzzle in terms of what Regan can bring to bear, is that understanding of how this whole mechanism and pipe, the plumbing, if you will, of communications can really help you get things done.
Well, one of the things when you go out to become a consultant, you try and figure out what are the things I know, that helps, and what are the things I'm interested in, that also helps. And that so that gives you a leg up. You don't always get that opportunity. Sometimes someone will come and ask you to do something that you haven't done or didn't think about doing, let's just say. But as my old boss, Paul Brest, used to say, this is a variation on that, is which if you want to learn about something, teach a class in it, because he was a professor at Stanford and they'd ask him to teach a class that he didn't know anything about. So he'd learn a lot about it. And I also think if you want to learn something, then you should become a consultant in it. And you learn fast. And usually it's just subject matter. You get quick on subject matter, something that you didn't quite know and you have to learn quickly. And actually it helps not to be too steeped in subject matter as a consultant anyway, because you don't want to be the one who, you hear the music in your head, nobody else does. So you have to come into this work with something of a, the Buddhist beginner's mind, where you act like the outsider because you are, and you react to the things that you see based on that perspective. And often, we think we're talking to folks who we're not actually talking to. We're talking to ourselves, and that's a big problem. So I do think that sometimes you go into a project that you don't have a ton of familiarity with, and that's really helpful. But the other part is find something that you know a lot about and you're good at, and make that your area.
Well, and this reflection alone would get me on the phone to hire Sparkwise Communications. When Regan says strategic communications is jet fuel.
Yeah.
I love that way of thinking about this work. This is jet fuel. And I kind of wish I'd had that metaphor in my back pocket for all these years, because that's exactly how it works. Like when you get this work ordered in the right way, with the right supports, with the right stuff happening in the field and the right messengers and storytellers, and now you're in narrative, now you're in, amplifying impact. It's absolutely jet fuel. And it's so painful to see so many of our organizations that are doing the frontline work, the most important work, they're not being fueled. And it's so easy to say that's just a matter of, well, bad strategy and tactics. I actually don't think that's necessarily fair. I actually don't think they're being resourced at the level at which they need to be, so that they could take advantage. Like, you need the jet to put the fuel into, And so this is, again, a role that a consultant like Regan can play, to like drop in, almost be that frontline person to say, hey, this is how we can get some quick wins. This is how we can get this work done. So I love that notion of jet fuel. It's just, I love it. It's just totally on the mark.
I will have to give Regan a little bit of, stuff for using a fossil fuel reference, but that's okay.
Hey, you don't know what that fuel's made of. It could be.
I think I do.
Algae paste.
I think it's made of dinosaurs.
It could be. Electricity, who knows? Could
but
be.
That's okay. We forgive you, Regan. I understand. No, it's true. Yeah, the communications, you come in and you do have the opportunity to make those folks really see how they can be successful, how they can make a difference. And it's not, I had this conversation today with somebody who mistook communications for messaging. Like, because he's like, oh, that's just communications. No. Communications is the thing that connects you to your audience and to their heart, that inspires people, that unlocks, that requires you to ask all of the strategic questions about what it is we're trying to achieve and who it is we're trying to persuade and what is it that they care about. And then how do I create messages that connect with them, that speak to their values? That's not messaging. That is understanding how change gets made. And that's what a really good communications consultant can do. So don't be whatever. I'm disabusing anyone who thinks that communications is like messaging. So that's not what we do.
So let's kick the tires a little bit, maybe kick the door open a little bit.
It's kicking.
For the person who's thinking about what's down there across the street, but they can't leave the 15th story of the 40-story building that they're in, where they've been doing this institutional work for so long. Let's talk a little bit about the joy of missing out. JOMO, which was introduced. So what are the things that you start trading out of when you leave that massive institutional home? And there were a couple of things that were right up top of mind. You're not in this performance review factory going on, which, by the way, the fact that that's such a known deficiency for most people's experience just puts such a spotlight on, like,
nobody likes it.
Maybe we need to be building capacity around performance and performance management if it's such a universally dreadful thing for everybody. Yeah.
Nobody likes it. Everybody hates it.
I'll never forget, my daughter was like, I don't know, 3 or 4, no, younger than that. Whenever you start getting your teeth, and we went to this kid's dentist for the first time, and I'm like, wait a minute. When did they figure out that going to the dentist could be one of the funnest things that could happen to a really young kid? And I was
I go to the kid's dentist.
I was so angry. I was like, right, like, wait, you're telling me I can't? I would love to go to but this is a similar thing. It's like the fact that these performance review processes are so dreadful for all of us. It's like we're still doing that thing. The notion.
Next time I go for performance review, I want to cook.
Yes, that's right. Make it fun. Make it engaging. How about
I want a clown.
How about something that meaningfully,
but not a scary clown,
energizes me and makes me excited to do the work? How about that? How about something there? But also,
you know what that's called? It's called a raise.
But also, the notion of just being so married to an institutional or a single executive voice, like actually being able to branch out from that. I thought that was interesting. That notion of like being fully absorbed by the Borg, and all of a sudden now you need to step out of that. So I do think from a certain perspective, having watched your work perform over time, and we don't need to talk about mine, but I have my own version of this, like actually being able to be in the field, doing the stuff you love, being directly involved with that, and not having these layers of, let's call it for what it is, bureaucracy or whatever you want to say about it. that's another enormous freedom that shows up when you start making transitions like this.
Yeah, that's right. And I once had a gig where I was the interim. I was running communications for a foundation, and they asked me how much time they thought I would need, and I would say 15 to 20 hours a week. I'm like, what do you mean it's a full-time job? Yeah, but the actual working part is 15 to 20 hours a week if you're lucky.
Right.
Because the other 20-something hours a week is trying to figure out, going to a meeting where you have to decide whether to put, peanuts in the M&Ms, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What we once had I was once at a meeting where we decided which doors to lock and which ones to leave open. So, that's not communication. It's part of being a good organizational citizen. You do it, but the actual work of the thing that we do, you don't do that nearly as much of it. And actually, as a communications director, after a while, I wasn't doing anything at all.
Yeah.
I'm just hiring consultants to do the stuff that I don't have time to do because I'm trying to figure out whether we should use peanut M&Ms or not.
Well, and the painful inventory that anybody who's working in the context of a really large organization could make, and we're not management process consultants, so we're not offering solutions to this, but we're just identifying the problem, which is anybody who works in that big setting, if you really did an inventory per week of the time you spend that serves you versus the time you spend that doesn't serve you. And I'm not talking about the downtime where you feel like you're wasting time. I'm talking about, the time where I'm like, this just doesn't serve me. It's such an enormous load on all of us. And that's one of the things I've witnessed, running a nimble virtual enterprise for over a decade. I never look at a calendar of meetings for a week, and our calendars are packed. There is never a meeting on it where I'm like, what am I doing there? What's the purpose of that? What is the agenda? What's the outcome we're going to get to? So there's this efficiency that shows up, but you don't even call it efficiency. You're just doing the work and you're enjoying it. So that is one thing that happens when you kind of step out. Now, Regan mentioned it. I think we should spend a couple of in the effort to be balanced and fair and to
good
recognize the whole thing.
About time.
You also represented accurately, I think, that when you go on your own, one question you need to ask yourself is, how thick is my stomach lining?
Yeah.
Because let's face it, it can be stressful. And I would say among the many stressors for people leaving philanthropy, this is the huge change. And I thought that Regan had some really artful ways to talk about this change. But instead of the money giver with the line out the door and around the block and over the horizon of all the people saying, here's my best idea, will you fund it? Here's my best idea, will you fund it? Now you're actually in that line saying, actually, here's an idea. Have you thought about this before? And that's a radically different place to be in the world.
When you leave the foundation, you figure out who your friends are. That's for sure. and you learn. Well, but the weird thing, I was going to say, you learn you're not as smart as you used to think you were. But
or funny, or as good looking.
Yeah. But that's actually sort of kind of not true. When you're a consultant, you're brought in to be the smart person.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're brought in to solve the problem. And you'll go into a meeting, and someone will bring up a question, and they'll say, "Well, what does our communications fancy consultant have to say?" And 10 heads swivel in your direction.
Yeah.
Your job is to say something useful and meaningful. And the fact is, it doesn't have to be the best idea. It just has to be a firmly convicted idea, because people want to be led. Like, okay, great, take us someplace. And so therefore, I think the courage of one's convictions really help.
Courage.
Courage. That's you have an idea, and you just have to kind of put yourself behind it. And because people will. Oh, and the other thing is, I used to hire consultants to tell my colleagues the thing I'd been telling them for a long time, because I'm just schmo on staff, and this is the expert from the world, the real world, who's coming in to give us their expertise. And so therefore, sometimes it is a partnership with your comms director, client, or whomever, to like, okay, let's figure out how we can communicate with our own staff here at this foundation or at this nonprofit, because the in-house folks are, familiarity breeds, I don't know, ennui maybe, if not contempt. So that's where the consultant plays another important role as somebody who can reinforce ideas that the comms director had already been trying to float but couldn't get them through because they're on staff, that kind of thing. Or to come up with just new ideas that you can you can just help people unlock something that had been locked for a long time.
Yeah, and it's funny. One of the things I say around our shop all the time is like, nobody calls us when it's easy.
Yeah, that's true.
If it's 1 + 1 = 2, the phone is probably not going to ring, right? Like we're needing to think about some of the things. But to that point, you need to be able to be salient, persuasive, evidence-based where that's possible. You need to actually kind of have some grounding in what you're trying to do. And again, this is the kind of natural skill set that someone with the depth and breadth of experience that Regan brings. That's what Regan walks through the door with.
Yep,
and
that's right.
That notion of being able to, be informative, just think about ideas. Regan did point out, and I thought you had a very interesting exchange around this. Sometimes it's hard to get the full picture when you're coming in from the outside. And then I really liked your comment here. And I this is something we don't have a ton of experience with because we've been very fortunate, but I know it's out there. If you smell something funky,
oh yeah,
you get out. And this is the other part too, because sometimes the consultant budget is bigger than the willingness to actually do the real work. And so sometimes that whole exercise of bringing somebody in, even for well-compensated projects, can actually be just not great, not productive. But again, now suddenly as the consultant, you can self-select in or out of that dynamic, which is not a choice you get to make when you're inside the board.
No, that's true.
You're just going to the next meeting. So, but I thought that was, I loved your reflection on that.
Whatever you said, that the tuna fish sandwich wrapped in a red flag, or something like that.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
No, I've had a few of those where I went,
Exactly.
I made a bad mistake. I got to get out of here. And I have, gently, quietly backed out of the room. But it's better off if you don't let that thing happen in the first place. And if you're a consultant and you're really looking for money and you're looking, you're trying to build your base and you build your client list, very hard to say no to a bad idea. But if you're out there, say no to the bad idea. I promise you, another good idea will come along. It just will.
So speaking of good ideas, I've got an enormously good idea that I'm stealing from Regan's interview.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So Regan closes by making the pitch, let's have more women-led and people of color-led consultancies that are actually ready for us, who can help us in those moments. So here's a pitch I want to make to global philanthropy. Put You're Ready for Us consultancies on a $1,000 a month retainer just to be in your phone book of first calls you make when you're looking for help, and seed those lists with women-led and people of color-led consultancies. So this is a zero ask request to a consultancy where you say, look, we just want to know that you're out there ready to support us. Here's $1,000 a month to do nothing. Just take our call. And we know you would take our call anyway, because this is your business development, but we're actually going to put some skin in the game to say, we care enough about you. And then we'll tell our team internally, hey, there's no barrier to entry. You can call them. Maybe you put some boundaries on it. You say, we're buying 4 hours of free time per month or something like that, for that $1,000. But then you use that to seed these lists of consultancies that are women-led and people of color-led and in whatever communities you think should be better represented to better reflect your work. So we're actually driving resources into those consultancies even before we put them on the hook to say, okay, well, here's this contract or that contract. What do you think about that idea?
Foundations are rich. Make it 2.
There you have it, right?
Make it 3. They have plenty of money.
Right?
They do.
There you have it. There you have it.
They only spend 5% of it, but they have plenty of money.
There you have it. But just, saying, hey, we just care about your capacity to just be available for us. And obviously that's got a field building dimension too, because the more healthy organizations we can create, the more they can be useful and beneficial to all sorts of other organizations and create the outcomes that you actually want, which is let's say it's $3,000 a month. You want your $36,000 of investment to create millions of dollars of beneficial change.
Sure.
I think it will happen more often if these organizations are incrementally healthier as a result of that. And if Mackenzie Scott hears this and gets super excited, let's add a couple more zeros, right? But these firms are out there. They're knowable. They're known. They've got credentials. They're doing the work. And everybody is struggling these days. So why not put a little bit of support out there before we even ask people to do the work? And the reason I would put a dollar value to it is because we want these groups to be known. We want to create an intentional process to pull them forward. So that could be potentially a project that Sparkwise Communications heads up on behalf of a coalition of foundations to identify those firms, vet them, and then create the mechanisms through which they can all get paid. So Regan, that might be something.
The Tom Sawyer of everything. You got people to paint your fence.
See? Another great idea. This was a great conversation. Regan Douglass, we're so happy to have you in this world, this part of the world. 2 years you've had your shingle out. Very timely. So glad it's been going well. And again, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, can I do this? The answer is yes. You can absolutely do this. So give it a shot. Why not? What do you think, Eric?
Yeah. And call Regan and ask Regan about things. You can always call me. I take everybody's calls. I'm always happy to help people do anything at all. So, but yeah, it's a wonderful life. I have to tell you.
Well, that's Regan Douglass, the founding principal at Sparkwise Communications. And you can find Regan at sparkwisecommunications.com. Please reach out, talk to Regan, hire Regan. And if you're thinking about entering this world, please do. We can say from firsthand experience that there's more help always needed. And you have the skills to help. So become a helper. Eric, that was a great conversation. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you, Kirk. And thank you always for being so cheerful.
Come on. This is great. And courage, everybody. Courage. Let's hear it. We'll see you next time. Okay, everybody. That's it for this episode. Please let us know if you have any thoughts about what you heard today or people we should have on this show. And that definitely includes yourself. And we'd like to thank John Ali, the tuneful and inspiring composer of our theme music.
Our sponsor, the Lumina Foundation.
And please check out Lumina's terrific podcast, Today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent. And you can find that at luminafoundation.org.
We certainly thank today's guest and, of course, all of you.
And most importantly, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Oh, no. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, everybody. Till next time. Do you think we talk about courage enough?
Courage?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think this conversation today is about courage.
Courage. Ooh, that's fun.
It's about courage.
Wait,
I got you.
Stop. We have to start over. I didn't know you were talking.
How dare you? How dare you? This is my great open. Now it's not going to be hot.
It'll be very hot. Hold on a second. Okay, good. Sorry. I just needed to.
I thought you were rolling.
I am rolling, but I made a mistake.
Okay, I'm going to roll and I'm going to
Okay.
count to 10. Okay, you ready?